Hi, in this video I'm going to explore various weathering techniques against this old kill team scenery. Some of it started off with a base coat of metal, others with a base coat of metal or some other colour, then chipping medium, and then pallid witch flesh as the painted colour. With all of this I've applied the winter streaking grime effect to give it this dirty look. That's all rubbed off with white spirits. And then again, all of it I've applied dirty down rust, and then in these cases I've applied a gloss varnish on top. I'm happy with it how it came out. I think I've probably been a little bit excessive in the number of zenithal layers and highlights I've done between stages, as the grime effects and stuff can do a lot of that work for you. So see how I got there. Hi, I've got some new products I was going to try. I've got these heavy chipping and worn effects products from AK, along with their winter streaking grime and this dirty down rust effect, which is supposed to be quite good. I've also got this set of Vallejo inks to mess around with it as well. And I was going to apply this to a range of old kill team scenery I had. The plan is to apply a zenithal highlight to a good proportion of this. Some of that will then get a mix of Rhinox hide or gunmetal or this medium brown from Vallejo. On top of that, I'll apply that chipping effect. On top of that, I'll then paint this pallid witch flesh, which will be the painted colour of the scenery, and then maybe I'll use some of this to try and get some lighting effects applied to some of the scenery. There's some lights on these doors which should work. Quick zenithal over these, just very lightly. Try to pick out these things as the light source, and then went over with a little bit of dry brushing afterwards, just to try and pick out some more of the details. Same with these, zenithal and then dry brushing, which helps pick out the lower level bits. Initial basing's done. So there's some some that were painted black originally. They've just been had a zenithal on and then silver on top. There were some that were white before I tried to wash, and then the metal on top didn't really have an impact. There's the Rhinox hide, quite dark brown initially. I just painted the face metal. That's the Vallejo medium brown. I think that'll be quite nice when it's got the chipped stuff on top. Again, just put a bit of metal on the face. On some of them I tried a bit of dry brushing over the top. That is, again, dark brown on top and gunmetal underneath. Most of the doors I did with the medium brown, and then just a little bit of dry brushing to pick things up. That one was originally white with a little bit of orange in the recesses. That's had the medium brown on it. What else we got? The difference between doing a zenithal and then the metal, that's zenithal and that metal, and that's just pure black with the metal from the top, and that's about it. All different types of other types of combinations, but I think that covers most of what I'm doing. Right, 2 piles of stuff, one for heavy chipping and one for worn effects. All painted. I decided to not just do them pure pallid witch flesh, but mix up a bit of pallid witch flesh, some Celestria grey, and throw in a bit of primer in it as well, to give it a darker shade first, and then went over with the lighter colour, and then dry brushed on top of that. So they're not looking too bad now. They are all, I just picked that one up from that side. They are all done and ready to start chipping away with a bit of water and a toothbrush. Worn effects are done. So with the heavy chipping, it came off quite nicely. Big chunks, quite dramatic. Quite like the way it's come off on that piece. I was trying. It took a little while to soak, so I was wetting one, then doing one, and then wetting the next one, and then doing one, and then wetting one, and then doing one, and then wetting one, and doing one. I think definitely for large steel things like vehicles, large buildings, it probably works okay. I think for little men it's not so good. Can you tell which ones it is? I think that's probably the one of the darker Rhinoxide ones. It's come up quite nicely. That's a metal one by comparison. You see the metallic shining through. I think that was painted dark brown at the bottom, and then that medium brown at the top. Not always going to be able to. Don't know. It's always worth doing all the levels of zenithal. Came off quite nice on the doors. Flaked off really easily. It's gone hard now. Still pretty scratchy, and we'll need to get a varnish on it pretty quickly. For the worn effects, I'm not sure it was quite so good on these large things. It's got that worn, it has a worn effect, but it's less, it looks less genuine, as it were. So maybe not quite so good on that sort of scale. It's still quite nice. I think I found that just absolutely going for it, getting the paint right back, especially with metals underneath, that seems to work fairly well. So it looks like it's been really heavily worn rather than just some light wear seems to be more effective. That's what the brown looks underneath instead of a metal. Say that's what a metal finish looks like underneath. All in all, I'm quite happy with those. So next up, streaking grime. So we've got the worn effect stuff from just before. That's been covered in matte varnish. That's in gloss varnish. Same on this side. This is the heavy chipping stuff. Matte varnish, gloss varnish, and a range of metal stuff that wasn't painted and chipped. Various levels of undercoating, and some old painted stuff my wife had a bash at earlier. Grime's applied. Done about a 10-minute batch. I did a couple of inks over the top of that just before it went in to see how the colours turn out. The first one I did should be tacky dry now, so I'm going to start trying to get the stuff off. Done a first batch. That's how it's coming out. That's been rubbed down afterwards. That's what it was like just before. It's coming out pretty good. I rubbed off more with these ones. Still got a nice this effect going on. The Q-tips weren't doing too well, so I cut an old t-shirt quick. With things like the barrels, there's one for comparison. Tints it a lot, as you might expect. Yeah, it's looking good. Streaking grime is done. Winter streaking grime. So we got the two sets that were done with the matte varnish and the gloss varnish. To be honest, I didn't see any real difference. I'm not sure varnishing does much. I don't think any difference in the materials does anything. Nice effects. It did tint it quite a lot from the original whiter colour. That one's quite nice. Still drying a little bit, but it's come up well. Daubed a load on the top there afterwards to get like a more of a runny effect. Put some in the middle. Yeah, that bit's nice. I was quite aggressive with the rubbing off. I started off with the little sticks. They were useless, so I watched somebody's video a while just before this one. They recommended cutting up a t-shirt. Kapow. That was quite a good video. These were the metal ones. I did some spattering on all of them afterwards. You can see it on these ones. Just daubed the thick stiff brush and spattered it on. It's giving it a little bit of extra character to stuff. You can see, you can just see those red and blue wires there. The colours come out quite well. I daubed a load extra, like as if it's coming out of these vents as well. Still drying a little bit. That's all good. These were the ones I put that extra colour on. I spent a bit of time rubbing those colour sections down a bit more than the others. But that's all come out nicely. What else have we got? More metal ones. I think some of these I painted a bit darker before, a bit lighter afterwards. Not too much difference. The metals have come up nicely, but I think I'd try and go for a darker metal at the bottom and a lighter one at the top, so they've got more of a colour difference. Looks kind of like these ones where they're darker at the bottom. Again, I rubbed it off more heavily at the top. It was really quite vigorous. Didn't take off the paint below until I rubbed really hard. So you can be pretty aggressive with these. These are some of the ones which had a bit of paint on before from my wife's had a quick go. That one, strangely, was really hard to get off. That's some of the colours on the other side. I think any old paint job you could apply this over the top of, and it'll give it a load of extra depth. So these were the ones with the, with the heavy chipping. Heavy chipping is less apparent now. I mean, you can still see it in some places. It still shows up. It's all adding to the overall effect now, rather than like before the heavy chipping was really apparent. It's just giving it all this sort of compound, worn sort of feel. Actually, that was silly. That was just one I painted white and then applied the stuff to. So that's got no chipping effect on. It was just painted white, and this one had. There you go. You can actually see the chipping effect much better on there. What's the difference? So these ones were the gloss ones and these ones were the matte ones. Again, I can see no real difference. I've spent the most time on that one. That's come up really nicely. See bits of the chipping stuff below. Looking forward to doing my Lehman Russ in that. Yeah, the spattering I think was a nice little effect, like focusing it down at the bottom afterwards. Really grungy effect on this, really well worn. So quite happy with all that. Dirty down rust. So I've had a go at everything. When I first started, it was looking like that. It needs a good shaking. By the end of it, I was just leaving the brush in the pot and taking it from the bottom and swirling it each time. It was the only way I could find to get like the interesting texture out of it. I think it works a little bit better on the lighter paint. It seems to show up a lot more. You can go quite heavy with it. On the metal, don't think it was quite as effective. I think it's the slightly glossy finish. It just didn't seem to adhere and work in the same way. Those were the earlier ones before I was stirring it as much. These were afterwards. I think the effects a lot better there. Just slapping it on for the most part, getting it thicker where I want. Certainly after a while I noticed that if you want to get a slightly reduced effect, like reduce the blotchiness of it, I had one brush that I was using for the actual applying it, and then I had another one which I just dipped in water and then blended the effect in to make it look a little less like it was slept on with a brush. You can get like fairly detailed effects with that. That piece came up quite nicely. Trying to make it look like it's drizzling out of the rust is drizzling out of those bolt holes. Last piece, I just scraped the residue of the stuff that built up on it over there, and it's actually going black there where that stuff is built up. I don't know whether that'll hold, but you know, you do eventually get like a sludgy build-up. With some of them I was brushing off the stuff as soon as I applied it. It does dry pretty quickly, so if you want to do that and like make like a surface, not have the rust effect, you have to be pretty quick to do that. Put it on pretty heavy there. I mean, that's supposed to be a door that's been knocked off and its hinges and put on its side, so I'd expect it to be fairly battered, but you're starting to lose the weathering effect underneath if you do it too heavily. And that was a pure white barrel. Just applied a heavy coat on there. I think it would be better if it was silver. Get a better effect then. So interesting product. I've tried doing some OSL effects. That one's probably best. It was a dry brush of white and then a little glaze of yellow. I think being more subtle with these is probably better. I've tried other ones where I've been a bit more heavy-handed and tried to go in with the airbrush with it, and it just doesn't look right. Same again with the red. Not a brilliant effect. Quite liked the white on its own, but it just doesn't show up enough as a white light. I think you need a bit of yellow, a bit of colour in there to make the OSL effect play. I finished doing the varnishing, a combination of the matte, satin and gloss varnishes. These were applied after I've done everything else. I tried to keep the matte on the rust, the satin, over most of the metal and paintwork, and then the gloss in a couple of areas where I've wanted to make it look like there's a bit of water coming down, to make it look like it's still wet. In hindsight, it would have been easier to do matte and satin varnishes before applying the rust, and then it's easier to keep those areas because that's got a natural sort of matte finish anyway, so it would have been better to do it in that order.